When you picture the fall of an empire, you probably think of huge armies, clashing swords, and epic betrayals, right? But what if I told you one of the Roman Empire's deadliest enemies was totally invisible? A force that didn't leave its story in history books, but buried it deep on the ocean floor. Well, today we're uncovering that incredible story, how a few degrees of change in the climate helped bring one of the world's greatest empires to its knees.
It's a massive question, for sure. But thanks to some amazing new science, we can finally start to get some answers. We're going to dig into the powerful and honestly often overlooked link between the weather, devastating pandemics, and the ultimate fate of Rome. Okay, so to really understand the crisis, we first have to see Rome when things were good, really good. For centuries, as the empire was growing and conquering, it had this powerful, silent partner on its side, the weather.
So where does a quote like this even come from? Well, it's from a brand new study of a sediment core. Think of it like an ice core, but drilled from the bottom of the sea off the coast of Italy. Each layer is like a little time capsule, trapping ancient pollen and tiny organisms, giving us this incredible year-by-year history of the climate. And what it shows is this long, amazing period that scientists call the Roman climate optimum. It was unusually warm, it was humid, and most importantly, it was stable. You couldn't ask for a more perfect recipe for growing food and expanding an empire.
But you know how it goes. Good things don't last forever. And that same incredible scientific record that shows us to glory days also pinpoints the exact moment it all started to go wrong. The climate began to shift, and it set off this devastating chain reaction of crises that would shake the Roman world to its very core.
And what's wild is just how precise this data is. You can see it clear as day. The stable, warm period starts to unravel right around 100 CE. Then, after 130 CE, things take a really sharp turn for the worse. The trend was unmistakable. The climate was getting colder, it was getting drier, and it was getting way, way more unpredictable.
And this is where the story gets downright terrifying. Just look at this timeline. That first major cold snap, right after 130 CE, is followed just a few decades later by the horrific Antonine Plague. Then, a second, even nastier cold and dry spell in the 200s lines up almost perfectly with the plague of Cyprian. The connection between this climate stress and these pandemics, it's just too strong to be a coincidence.
So, the key takeaway here is this massive shift. The very environmental foundation that had let Rome thrive, all that warm, wet weather, it was just gone. It was replaced by this stressful new reality of cold and dry. And that would have had a huge, huge impact on everything from the food supply to social stability.
And this slide right here really shows you the human cost of that shift. This period of climate chaos overlaps perfectly with what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. And trust me, they call it a crisis for a reason. We're talking about constant civil war, economic collapse, non-stop invasions, and, as we just saw, these absolutely devastating pandemics.
So, you have to wonder, when faced with this perfect storm of climate change, plague, and invasion, how did the empire even survive? Well, the answer lies with one man, the Emperor Diocletian, and one of the most radical military reorganizations in all of history.
This quote just perfectly captures the desperation of the time. After decades of crisis, the army was weak. The borders, which were once thought to be unbreakable, were failing. Invaders were just pouring in. Diocletian looked at this whole mess and knew he couldn't just apply a bandage. He had to do something radical.
And the scale of what he did was just staggering. He didn't just try to patch the holes in the military, he rebuilt the entire thing from the ground up. He jacked up the number of Roman legions from around 40 to nearly 60. That's a massive boost in military power.
But here's the brilliant part. It wasn't just about throwing more soldiers at the problem. He completely changed their defense strategy. He built new, stronger forts. He created a brand new command role, the Dux, to lead the frontier zones. And this was the real game changer. He created a permanent, mobile field army that could race to any hotspot in the empire and crush threats.
He also came up with this super innovative idea for a new kind of soldier, the limitani. These guys were basically soldier farmers. The deal was, the empire gave them land along the frontier to farm, and in return, they acted as the first line of defense, holding down the forts until the fast-moving field army could show up. It was a genius way to secure and repopulate those vulnerable borders.
And you know what? Diocletian's incredible reforms actually worked. They stabilized the empire, they ended the crisis of the 3rd century, it looked like they were in the clear. But that invisible enemy, the climate, wasn't done with him yet. It had one more absolutely devastating blow to deliver.
This next climate shock wasn't a slow, gradual cooling.
No, this was a sudden, severe, and long-lasting deep freeze that kicked in around the year 536. We now call it the Late Antique Little Ice Age, and it was likely caused by massive volcanic eruptions that literally blocked out the sun.
Now, to put that into perspective for you, temperatures dropped by about 3 degrees Celsius compared to the peak of the Roman Golden Age. Now, 3 degrees might not sound like a huge deal to us today, but for a society that depends completely on agriculture, a change of that size is an absolute catastrophe.
And the scientists who've studied this are very clear. This was not a minor blip on the radar. They emphasize the sheer magnitude, abruptness, and longevity of it all. What that means is the world the Romans knew was basically gone, replaced by a completely new and hostile environment.
And right on cue, that deadly pattern repeats itself one last terrible time. This extreme deep freeze happens at the exact same time as the outbreak of the third great pandemic of the Roman world, the plague of Justinian. And this was the first time the world met Yersinia pestis, the same bacteria that would later cause the Black Death. The impact was just devastating.
So, what do we do with this incredible centuries-long story of climate change and collapse? It's way more than just ancient history. What can it possibly teach us, right here, right now, in our own era of rapid environmental change?
Well, what the Roman experience gives us is a clear chain of events. First, environmental stress, like cooling or a drought, acts as a huge destabilizer. It messes with the food supply, which makes people weaker and more vulnerable to disease. Then, those health crises can spark massive social and political upheaval, like Diocletian's reforms. It's a powerful, powerful reminder of just how deeply connected our societies are to the climate.
And that really brings us to a final, pretty sobering thought. The Romans faced a climate change that unfolded over centuries, and it was still enough to trigger pandemics and push their entire world to the brink of collapse. Our climate is changing at a speed they couldn't have even imagined. So when we look back at what happened to them, we really have to ask ourselves, are we paying enough attention to the lessons from their fate?